Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of My Adventures with Superman. It was called My Adventures with Mad Science. As it starts, Lois and Clark realize that Jimmy's missing and they go looking for him. Lois, of course, is still steamed at Clark for not disclosing that he was Superman, which is not even slightly irrational. Except it is. They find his phone in the woods and realize that Bigfoot snatched him. Jimmy, meanwhile, finds himself on a slab about to be cut open by a talking gorilla with a German accent and a robot. So it's not Gorilla Grodd, which I thought maybe it was at the end of last week's episode. Anyway, as Clark and Lois continue to search, they come across a Cadmus minefield where stuff is like floating in midair. And Lois asks Clark if Jimmy knows about him, and he says no, at which point she wonders just how much of what he ever said was true and if his feelings for her are true. Meanwhile, the robot and the gorilla have a change of heart about cutting Jimmy open, and they take him off the operating table and begin showing him around the place because I guess the gorilla feels like they need friends and people to admire their work. Apparently, Cadmus had wanted them to be weapons and to develop weapons, but they rebelled against that and wanted to make things to make the world work better until they were found out, and one of their experiments went haywire when Cadmus soldiers attacked their lab. Lois and Clark soon find themselves under attack by flying robot drone things with lasers, which eventually assemble themselves into one of the giant robots from previous episodes, which Clark fights before they separate again into smaller machines, at which point Clark has to fly Lois out of there. But he can't sustain flight for some reason, as his powers have been weakened. They manage to escape the machines, but then run into a giant gun, which Clark takes all the fire from, even though he didn't know at that point that he was bulletproof, rendering him completely shirtless, which he later says he did because what he knew for sure is that Lois wasn't bulletproof. Apparently, the big experiment that the gorilla and the robot still have going is an unstable wormhole that they hope to stabilize. Lois and Clark eventually make it to the facility where Jimmy's hanging out with the gorilla and the robot, and they leave Jimmy to talk with Lois and Clark. Clark goes to tell Jimmy that he's Superman, but Jimmy apparently already knew and has known for a long time, and just figured that Clark would tell him when he was ready. When Lois mentions how she only just found out, Jimmy learns that Clark came out to Lois before he came out to him, and he gets mad, even though he already knew, which is kind of funny. Apparently, the machines chasing Lois and Clark and now Jimmy were not Cadmus robots, according to the gorilla. Everybody makes it into the facility where Clark, Lois, Jimmy, the gorilla, and the robot have to stand against them. Clark explains to Lois and Jimmy that he didn't tell them because he just wanted to be their normal friend. And they said to him that they didn't care what he is because of who he is. And they just want him to be open with them. At which point, after being reset, the wormhole experiment starts sucking everything in, with only Clark to hold back himself, Lois, Jimmy, the gorilla, and the robot. The robot and the gorilla then decide that they have to leave because the field that was protecting their facility from being seen was broken. But it happens that that field was a red sun generator, which is why Clark had a problem with his powers when he was in the woods. The robot tells Clark that since he was affected by the red sun and seems to have a connection to the machines, he's going to be in the crosshairs of Task Force X and the general behind it, which we kind of already knew. Lois seems to forgive Clark for not telling her and takes his hand in hers as the robot and the gorilla go through the wormhole. As the episode ends, we learn that apparently the robot was right and that the general does indeed want to take Superman down. And that's where the episode ended. And apparently this episode wasn't the finale. And there is going to be an episode next week featuring Mr. Mixospitalik, however the hell you say that. And so, I don't know, maybe this is going to be an 8 or 10 episode season. I had thought it was just going to be the 5 episodes because that's all that was on IMDb. Well, 6 episodes because the first one was a 2-parter. But now there's a 7th episode listed, and that's next week's episode. So is it going to be an 8-episode season, a 10-episode season? Could be a 12-episode season. Who knows? We don't know. So I guess we're all going to just go along for the ride. Anyway, this episode was okay. I didn't think too much of it. I didn't really understand the whole part with the gorilla and the robot. I did like that they were looking for Jimmy and that, they kind of had to talk about how he didn't tell her and, all of that, but he still protected her and stuff because he cares for her. And some of the animation was cool. Like when he gets shot by the giant gun, it literally tatters, it literally shoots his shirt into atoms and it comes off of him. And that was cool. I liked that in the end, she takes his hand and everything seems to be normal again. And I thought it was funny how Jimmy was like, yeah, I've always known. But then when Lois says, oh, I only just found out, he's like, wait, you told her first when I'm your best friend. So I thought that was funny. But other than that stuff, I didn't think there was anything really great about this episode. Next week could be interesting though with Mr. Mixitspitalik, because he's generally a crazy element when he shows up, and so that should be interesting. And then I guess we'll find out together how many episodes this season will actually have. But that's really it. I'm going to get out of here for now. I apologize the video is so short. There's just not a lot to say about this episode. It wasn't that good, I didn't think, except for a couple of moments. But I'll be back to review next week's episode after it airs. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.